My beloved child. Don't skip. Something happened when you were not in the room, and the person who loves you was suddenly forced to answer a question they could no longer avoid. Someone stood before your soulmate and offered them something serious, something that could have completely changed the direction of their future. But what happened next was not what anyone expected. Stay till the end, because the most important part of this story is not the proposal itself. It is what your soulmate said afterward. Something huge is waiting for you. There are moments when a person can hide what they feel. They can smile when their heart is uncertain. They can change the subject when someone mentions a certain name. They can pretend they have moved forward. They can convince friends that everything is fine. But then life creates one moment where pretending becomes impossible. And that moment arrived. Your soulmate was not expecting it. The day had begun normally. There was no dramatic sign announcing what was coming. There was no warning that before the day was over, one question would force them to confront everything they had been trying not to admit. Then someone approached them. This person had been thinking about the moment carefully. They believed they understood your soulmate. They believed enough time had passed. They believed there was space in your soulmate's heart for something new. And then came the question. A proposal. A possibility of forever. For several seconds, your soulmate said absolutely nothing. That silence mattered. Because in that silence, they were not thinking about the person standing before them. They were thinking about you. Don't skip. The story changes here. The person waiting for an answer noticed something immediately. Your soulmate's expression had changed. It was not excitement. It was not the reaction they had imagined receiving. It was realization. Your soulmate suddenly understood that saying yes would mean choosing a future in which they would have to close the door on you. And strangely, that possibility affected them more deeply than the proposal itself. They had spent so much time trying to be reasonable. Maybe they had told themselves that feelings eventually disappear. Maybe they had believed distance would make everything easier. Maybe they thought silence would slowly erase what remained unfinished between you. But when another person offered them a different future, the truth became impossible to ignore. Their heart had not forgotten. And what they did next changed the atmosphere completely. They looked at the person in front of them and quietly said, "I can't give you the answer you want." Everything became still. The person who had proposed was confused. Why? Your soulmate hesitated. There are answers people give because they are polite. There are answers people give because they are afraid. And then there are answers that come from a place so honest that once spoken, they cannot be taken back. Your soulmate finally said, "Because part of my heart is somewhere else. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because that was only the beginning." The person standing there immediately understood that there was someone else. But they did not know who. So they asked the question your soulmate had been avoiding for far too long. Who? Your soulmate looked away. And your name almost escaped their lips. Almost. Instead, they whispered. Someone I never really stopped caring about. That sentence changed everything. Because your soulmate had finally said aloud what they had been refusing to admit even privately. They never truly stopped caring. Not completely. They may have tried to move forward. They may have appeared distant. They may have become quiet. But some connections do not disappear simply because two people stop speaking. Sometimes silence only hides them. And your soulmate had just discovered that truth in the most unexpected way. Don't skip now. Because what happened after the proposal was even more revealing. Your soulmate left that conversation carrying a strange emotional weight. They were not celebrating. They were not relieved. They were shaken. Not because someone had proposed. Because the proposal had exposed something inside them. For the first time, they were forced to imagine permanently choosing a life that did not include you. And they could not do it. That realization followed them everywhere. They replayed memories they thought they had buried. A conversation. A laugh. A moment when you understood them without needing an explanation. Something small you once said that somehow remained in their memory. They remembered the way your presence felt. And suddenly, questions began appearing. Why did they still remember these things? Why did your name still create an emotional reaction? Why had they been unable to accept someone else's promise? And most importantly, if they truly wanted to move on, why did the thought of losing you forever feel so wrong? Stay with this story. Because the answer came sooner than they expected. That evening, your soulmate spoke to someone they trusted. Not everyone knows about this conversation. They needed someone who would listen without judging them. The trusted person asked, "What happened?" Your soulmate initially tried to dismiss it. Nothing. But their expression betrayed them. The other person waited. Eventually your soulmate admitted. Someone asked me to build a future with them. The trusted person looked surprised. And what did you say? I said no. Then came another question. Why? Silence. Your soulmate looked down. And after several seconds, they said something that even surprised themselves. Because I kept thinking about the person I actually wanted to hear those words from. Don't skip. Read that emotionally. They were offered a future by one person while thinking about another. You. The trusted person understood immediately. They did not need your soulmate to explain everything. They simply asked. Then why are you still pretending? That question landed differently. Your soulmate had no answer. Because sometimes the hardest truth is not discovering what you feel. It is realizing how long you have been running from it. The trusted person continued. If your heart already knows, why are you trying to convince yourself otherwise? Your soulmate became quiet again. And this time, something shifted. The walls they had built around their emotions began to crack. They admitted they had been afraid. Afraid that too much time had passed. Afraid you had changed. Afraid you might not feel the same anymore. Afraid that reaching out could create an answer they were not ready to hear. But beneath every fear was something stronger. Hope. A tiny, persistent hope that the story between you had not completely ended. Something huge is waiting for you. Because the proposal did something your soulmate never expected. It gave them clarity. Before that moment, they could hide behind uncertainty. They could say, I don't know what I want. They could say, maybe someday. They could say, it's complicated. But when another future was placed directly in front of them, their heart answered immediately. No. Not because the person proposing was necessarily bad. Not because your soulmate wanted to hurt anyone. But because accepting something so serious while carrying unresolved feelings would have been unfair to everyone involved. And deep down, your soulmate knew it. They could no longer build a new beginning on top of an unfinished story. That unfinished story was you. Don't skip. Because now comes the detail nobody around them expected. After the conversation ended and your soulmate was finally alone, they reached for their phone. They opened it, paused, and searched for something. Your name. For a moment, they simply stared. There was your name on the screen. A doorway into everything they had been avoiding. One message could change the situation. One sentence could break the silence. Their fingers hovered. They typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. Then they wrote. I need to tell you something. They stared at the words. But they did not send them. Not yet. Something stopped them. Fear returned. What if you ignored them? What if you had already moved forward? What if they were too late? Their mind produced 100 reasons to stay silent. But their heart had one reason to speak. Because they finally understood what losing the possibility of you actually meant. Stay till the end. This is where the emotional direction changes completely. Your soulmate put the phone down. Walked away. Then returned. Picked it up again. Your name was still there. And they remembered the proposal. They remembered being asked to imagine forever with someone else. They remembered the immediate resistance inside their heart. Then one thought appeared. What if I keep waiting until there is nothing left to return to? That question frightened them more than reaching out. Because time does not always wait for courage. People change. Circumstances change. Doors eventually close. Your soulmate realized that remaining silent was also a decision. Every day they said nothing, they were choosing distance. Every day they hid their feelings, they were allowing misunderstanding to grow. Every day they assumed there would be another opportunity, they were gambling with something precious. And suddenly they did not want to gamble anymore. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Because the next morning, your soulmate woke up with a completely different feeling. Clarity. The proposal had forced them to confront the question. Who do I actually want beside me? And their heart had already answered. Not with logic. Not with convenience. Not with what looked easiest. With memory. With emotion. With your name. They sat quietly, thinking about what they would say if they finally had the courage to speak honestly. They imagined telling you. I tried to convince myself that I had moved on. They imagined admitting. I thought silence would make everything disappear. They imagined saying. But when someone asked me to choose forever, you were the person I thought about. And suddenly, your soulmate understood something. Perhaps love is not always revealed through perfect timing. Sometimes it is revealed through contrast. Sometimes you understand who matters when life shows you what choosing someone else would mean. That proposal became the mirror your soulmate had been avoiding. And the reflection was undeniable. Their heart was still carrying you. But wait. Because another person was about to learn the truth. Someone close to your soulmate had heard about the rejected proposal. They approached carefully. You turned them down? Yes. Are you sure? Your soulmate answered without hesitation. Yes. Then came the question. Is this because of that person from before? Your soulmate froze. They knew exactly who was being discussed. You. For once, they did not deny it. They did not laugh it away. They did not change the subject. They simply said, I think I made a mistake letting that connection become so distant. That confession was enormous. Because regret had entered the story. Not regret about rejecting the proposal. Regret about losing closeness with you. The person beside them asked. Then what are you going to do? Your soulmate took a slow breath. I don't know yet. But they did know. They were simply afraid to say it. They wanted to find a way back toward you. Stay till the end. Because there was still one more revelation hidden beneath everything. Your soulmate was not only thinking about whether you still cared. They were wondering whether you had been waiting for clarity too. They began remembering moments they had misunderstood. Times when you tried to communicate something. Times when you gave them patience. Times when perhaps you pulled away not because you stopped caring, but because you could no longer carry uncertainty alone. And that realization brought another question. Did I make them believe they meant less to me than they actually did? That question stayed with your soulmate. Because sometimes people hide love so effectively that the person they love eventually believes there is nothing there. Your soulmate began understanding the cost of their silence. They had expected you to somehow know. To read between the lines. To understand the emotions they never clearly expressed. But love cannot survive forever on assumptions. Eventually someone has to speak. And your soulmate was beginning to understand that perhaps this time, that someone needed to be them. Don't skip now. Something huge is waiting for you. Later that day, they returned to the message they had drafted. I need to tell you something. Still unsent. They changed it. Something happened recently, and it made me realize something. They paused. Deleted it. Too vague. They tried again. I've been thinking about you. Pause. Their heart raced. That sentence felt too honest. So they deleted it too. Then they laughed quietly at themselves. How strange. They had just rejected a life-changing proposal. Yet writing a few honest words to you somehow felt even bigger. Why? Because you were the person who could actually affect their heart. That was the difference. Rejection had been difficult. But vulnerability with you was terrifying. Because your answer mattered. Your soulmate could survive another person being disappointed. But they did not know how they would feel if you said, it's too late. And that possibility kept their finger away from the send button. For now. But something inside them had already changed. The silence no longer felt comfortable. It felt temporary. Stay till the end. Because the proposal was not the ending. It was the beginning of a decision. Your soulmate began asking themselves what kind of future they actually wanted. Not the future other people expected. Not the future that looked easiest from outside. Their real future. They pictured ordinary days. Morning conversations. Small disagreements followed by understanding. Laughter over things nobody else would find funny. Quiet evenings. Being able to sit beside someone without needing to perform. Being known. Being accepted. Being challenged to become better. And again, one person kept appearing in that picture. You. That was when your soulmate whispered something while completely alone. Why is it always you? It was not frustration. It was surrender. A realization that no matter how many times they tried to place the connection into the past, some part of it kept returning. But now the question was no longer, do I still feel something? They knew the answer. The question had become, what am I going to do about it? Don't skip. Because this is where the story becomes even more intense. The person who proposed eventually reached out again. Not to pressure your soulmate. They simply wanted closure. They asked one final question. Is there any possibility that your answer could change? Your soulmate thought carefully. Then answered. I don't want to give you false hope. It was respectful. Clear. Final. The other person understood. But before leaving the conversation, they said something your soulmate would remember. I hope whoever has your heart realizes how much they mean to you. Your soulmate went silent. Because the painful truth was that you might not realize it. How could you? They had hidden it. They had buried it beneath silence. They had perhaps acted as though they were unaffected. And now someone else had accidentally pointed out the obvious. The person your soulmate loved might have no idea how deeply they were still remembered. Something huge is waiting for you. Because after hearing those words, your soulmate made a private decision. No more pretending. They were not necessarily ready to rush toward you with enormous declarations. They understood that real connection requires patience. They knew there might be questions. There might be things that need explaining. There might be old misunderstandings that cannot disappear in one conversation. But they decided something important. If an opportunity appeared to speak honestly with you, they would not hide anymore. They would tell you the truth. They would tell you about the proposal. They would tell you what happened inside them when they were asked to choose another future. And most importantly, they would tell you whose face appeared in their mind. Yours. Stay till the end. There is one final piece you need to hear. Your soulmate began imagining that conversation. They pictured you asking, why now? And they knew they would have to answer honestly. Because I finally understood what I could lose. They imagined you saying, you had so much time. And they would answer, I know. They imagined you asking, why should I believe you? That question was harder. Because words alone might not be enough. Your soulmate realized that if they truly wanted another chance at connection, they would need to show consistency. Not dramatic promises. Not temporary emotion. Actions. Patience. Honesty. Respect. They would need to prove that the realization created by that proposal was not simply a passing reaction. And strangely, this did not discourage them. It made them more certain. Because for the first time, they were not fantasizing about love. They were thinking about responsibility. What would it actually mean to choose someone? What would it mean to communicate instead of disappearing? What would it mean to protect trust instead of assuming it would always remain? Your soulmate began understanding that wanting you was only the beginning. Being ready for you required growth. And something inside them was finally willing to grow. Don't skip. Because the biggest transformation was happening quietly. Your soulmate stopped asking whether the timing was perfect. Perfect timing had already cost too much. They stopped asking whether fear would disappear. It probably would not. They stopped waiting for some magical sign guaranteeing that everything would work out. Instead, they began asking, "What is the most honest thing I can do?" And the answer was simple. Tell the truth. Not manipulate. Not pressure. Not demand. Simply tell you the truth and allow you to decide what you want. That was maturity they had not possessed before. And perhaps that is why this proposal arrived when it did. Not as punishment. Not as some supernatural guarantee. But within this story, as a turning point. A moment that forced one person to stop running from their own heart. Something huge is waiting for you. Because your soulmate eventually opened your conversation again. This time, they did not immediately type. They simply looked at your name. And instead of fear, they felt something softer. Gratitude. Gratitude that they had known you. Gratitude for the memories. Gratitude that someone had once made them feel understood enough that even after distance, the memory still mattered. Then they typed. "Can we talk sometime?" Their finger hovered over send. Seconds passed. Their heartbeat quickened. Everything they had avoided seemed to gather into that tiny moment. The proposal. The rejection. The confession to their trusted friend. The realization that you were still in their heart. The fear of losing you permanently. Everything had brought them here. One message. One possibility. One decision. And just before they pressed the screen, they whispered, "I'd rather know the truth than spend the rest of my life wondering." That was the change. Not whether you would immediately reunite. Not whether every problem would magically disappear. The change was courage. Your soulmate was finally becoming willing to face reality instead of hiding inside uncertainty. And whatever happens next, that matters. Because meaningful love cannot be built on endless guessing. It needs two people who are willing to be honest. Two people willing to listen. Two people willing to respect each other's choices. Two people who understand that love is not possession. It is not pressure. It is not a promise forced by urgency. It is a choice made freely. And your soulmate had just been offered one choice. They said no. Because another truth was waiting inside them. You. So remember this as the story continues. The proposal did not create their feelings. It revealed them. It did not suddenly place you inside their heart. It showed them that you had never completely left it. And the response that changed everything was not merely no. The response was the truth behind that no. I cannot promise forever to someone else while part of me is still wondering whether my real story was left unfinished. Stay till the end of this journey. Because your soulmate still has something they need to say. Something they have rehearsed silently more times than anyone knows. Something that could completely change the meaning of the distance between you. And when those words finally come out, the proposal will suddenly make sense. The silence will make sense. The hesitation will make sense. Even the fear will make sense. Don't skip. Because this story has reached the doorway, but it has not crossed it yet. Your soulmate has finally admitted the truth to themselves. Now comes the harder part. Admitting it to you. And something huge is waiting for you on the other side of that conversation.